Chuckie's first haircut is a brilliant Rugrats episode for several reasons. This is one I really, really remember from my childhood. It's the first segment of the second episode of the third season, and the title kind of explains what it's about. Chuckie is getting to get ready for his first haircut, but he's kind of scared, and then Angelica makes it worse by telling him it's going to hurt. And I never really thought about that before, but I suppose if you've never had scissors chopping through your hair, you probably don't know that it's not going to hurt, especially as if you pull your hair, that does hurt. So there is some kind of logic to his fear. But also, at least the barber shop in this episode seems quite an imposing place, and I can really understand Chuckie's fear. And he goes on his emotional journey with going back and forth about whether he should get it cut or if he wants to do the right thing, feeling scared of it. The other babies try and help him, of course, more of which I'll talk about in a moment. While also Chaz is trying to find ways to help Chuckie, and I love the child psychology aspect of this. As I've mentioned before, one of my favourite things about watching Rugrats as an adult is exploring the child psychology aspect and the early years milestones, and this is obviously a really important one for Chuckie. And I think Chaz generally went about it the right way. Maybe not, he might not agree with that, but yeah, I think there's some pretty good advice in this. But what I found really interesting as well is that Angelica says it hurts, and immediately Susie said no, it doesn't, and that's something that wouldn't have happened in the previous two seasons because Susie wasn't there, or not very prominently there at the end of the second season. But now there's somebody there to tell the babies, Angelica, you're lying. But actually, Angelica had a way of proving to Chuckie that maybe she wasn't lying, which I thought was a pretty good thing to do. There were some bits in this that I didn't love. For example, Chaz called Chuckie hopeless. Not to his face, but he doesn't know that Chuckie can't hear him. Never ever call your child hopeless, even if you don't think they're in earshot, because that will destroy them. Thankfully, Chuckie didn't hear. The whole hypnosis thing I thought was pretty engaging. I didn't find it too entertaining, except for the last time that the word banana was whispered and Chuckie quacked, and then it just cut to the next scene. It was just so funny. Really thoroughly enjoyed that bit of it. And what happens with Chaz's hair I found to be quite entertaining. It seemed to help Chuckie until things went too far. But it also made me think most children will actually have a go at cutting their own hair at some point. You have to be very careful with children and scissors. I know my sister used to have a bad habit of cutting her own hair whenever she got hold of scissors when she was very little. Maybe around about Chuckie's age, actually. So I think different children will have a very different experience with haircuts, but certainly I feel like Chuckie represents a typical response to that kind of situation. And he had some beautiful quotes at the end of this. I won't say exactly what happens or if he finally is able to go through with it, but some things that he thought out loud. It can't be any worse than living in fear. In fact, that might have been Tommy who said that. It was Tommy or Chuckie. I wrote down the quote, but not who said it. But it's a very valid point that the fear is almost worse than the thing itself because the fear is so powerful. And that's exactly what Chuckie was experiencing. If he just went through it the first time and got it over and done with, the fear would be gone, but the fear is persisting. But Chuckie also said, part of me kind of does want to do it. And I actually really relate to this. Very recently I had to get a blood test and I hate it. I can't even talk about it. It's a phobia of mine. But part of me wanted to do it because the fear was so overpowering that every time I thought about it, every time that there was that nagging voice in my head that said, you've got to do it, you've got to go through with it, I wanted to get rid of that. So I kind of wanted to get it done, and that's exactly what Chuckie was going through. He was so fed up of this fear and this voice that kept telling him, you have to do it, but it's going to hurt, you don't want to do it, but you need to get over it. He wanted to get his hair cut to get rid of that voice, and I think maybe part of him wanted to do it to say that he had done it. So I think there are a lot of things in this that can apply to adult life and older children, not just younger children and indeed people of Chuckie's age. It's definitely a very relatable episode, and I think something that will provide some really useful information for anybody going through a similar thing with their child, both with how to approach it and definitely how not to approach it as well. Doesn't surprise me that I really remember Chuckie's first haircut from my childhood. It's definitely a really solid episode.